Good morning, students. Today we start with this essay, Dream Children, a Reverie by Charles Lamb. Hope you have listened to the first video where I discussed about this author Charles Lamb and about his writing style. So the main point there was how lovable this person was. The most lovable in English literature, that was Charles Lamb. We discussed the style of Charles Lamb in the first part. It was mainly about how he intermingles humor and pathos in his essays. So, this is the best example for that style. How he blends together humor, and along with that, he narrates all those tragic incidents in his life. So, we have already gone through the biography of this person and we understood the tragedies happened to this person. So this essay, Dream Children, a Reverie, it is considered to be one of the most touching pieces written by Charles Lamb. I have also shared the essay with you. Please read the first part, first around 15 or 20 lines in that essay, and come back to this lecture. In this lecture, I will not be reading out line by line. I'll be discussing all those major points, but you have to read the first part. So you have to do an initial reading before coming to this lecture. So let us begin. He begins this essay with a universal statement, saying that children love to listen to stories. So that is a universal thing. Every children of all generations, of all countries, all over the world, they love to listen to the stories. Have you ever told stories to children? They will sit with all those wide eyes. And we see the whole story unfolding in their eyes. അവരുടെ കണ്ണിൽ കൂടെ നമ്മൾക്ക് ആ ഒരു കഥകൾ ഇങ്ങനെ മാറി മാറി വരുന്നതിന് അവരുടെ ആ ഒരു റിയാക്ഷൻ, അതിൽ നിന്ന് we understand how they love listening to these stories. ഇപ്പോൾ ഈ മൊബൈൽ വന്ന കാലഘട്ടത്തിലാണ് ഇതെല്ലാം മാറി മാറി വരുന്നത്. So here he starts with a universal statement. He says that children love to listen to stories, and especially the stories of their elders. They can stretch their imagination to the stories of their traditional great uncle or grandame. Grandame is grandmother. Here he says that he has two children, Alice and John. His two children, he says that they crept about the other evening into my lap to hear about their great grandmother field. So the whole story, he starts with this universal statement, and he says that they wanted, my children, two little ones, Alice and John, they want to hear the story of their great grandmother field. Grandmother Field. So Field, Mrs. Field was his grandmother and great grandmother of these two children, who lived in a great house in a place known as Norfolk. Actually, this was his mother's place. Norfolk was his mother's place. Charles Lamb used to spend his vacations there. Norfolk in Hertfordshire. And he says that the house there is 100 times bigger than in which they and their papa lived. It is 100 times bigger than their house in London City. Now they are currently residing in London City, and he says that the house their grandmother resided, it was 100 times bigger. It was a mansion. It was something like a bungalow. And he starts describing the house, the features of this house. He says that it was mostly made of wood, and the stories, like Children in the Wood, is carved out in that big rooms. Here he talks about a ballad, Children in the Wood. It is actually a tale of two children who lost their parents, and their parents wrote everything. So these children actually inherited the whole property of their parents, and these children were uh, taken care of by their father's brother. So he was a really bad person. He wanted to kill these children, and one day he sends these children to the woods, to the forest, and it was said that these children were attacked by animals and they were dead. And the story goes like this, that all the bodies of these two children were buried by a little bird, robin redbreast. Robin redbreast decorated the tombs of these two children with dry leaves. So ends the story. So that is Children in the Wood. And he says that the whole story was carved out in the wood upon the chimney piece of that great hall of this mansion. ഈ മാൻഷൻ്റെ വലിയ ഹാളിൽ മുഴുവൻ ഇങ്ങനെ വുഡൻ പീസസ്, അതിൻ്റെ ചുറ്റും മതിലുകളിൽ മുഴുവൻ ചുമരുകളിൽ മുഴുവൻ വുഡൻ പീസസ് ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. ആ വുഡൻ പീസസിൽ ഈ പറയുന്ന ബാലറ്റ്സ്, ഈ കഥകളാണ് കുത്തിവെച്ചിരുന്നത്. The Ballad of Children in the Wood till the story of Robin Redbreast. And he says that let me add one thing. One of the features of this essay, of all those Charles Lamb's essay, it contained very long sentences. If you go through this essay, you will understand. You will get to see a full stop after around 15 or 20 lines. ഒരു full stop വരുന്നത് ഒരു 10-15 ലൈൻ കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ടാണ്. So he uses long sentences, but it is not very hard. It is not very difficult to understand. He uses soft words. And let me continue. He says that he saw all those stories carved out in wood in that chimney piece, but later this mansion went to another rich person, and he was a foolish rich person. He destroyed all these wooden pieces, and instead of wooden pieces, he put out all those marble pieces, and it looked so ugly according to Charles Lamb. He says that till a foolish rich person pulled it down to set up a marble, one of the modern invention in its stead, with no story upon it. ഇപ്പോൾ നമ്മൾ പുതിയ വീട് വെക്കുമ്പോൾ, പഴയ വീട് പൊളിച്ചു കഴിഞ്ഞ് പുതിയ വീട് വെക്കുമ്പോൾ പഴയ ആ റെഡ് ഓക്സൈഡ് എന്നൊക്കെ മാറ്റി നമ്മൾ മാർബിൾ ഇടുക അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ടൈൽസ് ഇടുക. അപ്പോൾ ചില വീടിൻ്റെ ഭംഗി തന്നെ അങ്ങനെ പോകും. അതുപോലെയാണ് ഇവിടെയും പറയുന്നത്. He used all those modern invention in his home, and there were no stories. Earlier there were stories of children in the wood carved out in that chimney piece. Now there are no stories, and it almost destroyed the beauty of that mansion. Here, he continues, here Alice put out one of her dear mother's looks, too tender to be called upbraiding. As I said earlier, when you narrate stories to children, their eyes starts reacting. അവരുടെ കണ്ണിൽ കൂടെ ആ ഒരു കഥ അവരുടെ കണ്ണിൽ കൂടെ ഇങ്ങനെ മിന്നി മാഞ്ഞു പോകുന്നത് നമുക്ക് കാണാം. So here when he talks about the act of that foolish rich person, Alice gives one of her dear mother's looks. She has the eyes of her dear mother, and എന്ത് വിഡ്ഢിത്തരമാണ് ആള് ചെയ്തത് എന്നുള്ള രീതിയിലുള്ള ഒരു മുഖഭാവമാണ് ആരിലുണ്ടായിരുന്നത്, ആലിസിലുണ്ടായിരുന്നത്. And later First part, he talked about this universal statement about children's love for stories. Then he starts narrating the story to his two little ones, Alice and John. They particularly wanted to listen to the stories of their grandmother. It is actually great grandmother, Mrs. Field. And he begins the essay by by giving out a description of this great house in Norfolk. So that was the first part. Now he starts talking about Mrs. Field, that is his grandmother and great grandmother of these two children. He says that she was a very religious lady. She was loved by everyone. She was respected by everybody, though she was not the owner of the house. So this house, mansion in Norfolk, it is not their family property. Mrs. Field was actually the housekeeper of this mansion. She was the mistress of this great house. But she was respected, loved by everybody in that neighborhood. She had only the charge of it, but she lived like she was the owner of the house. She was given the full charge of this house because of the fact that she took care of this house more than the owner. And this owner preferred to live in another mansion in city, in another county, in another place. So this property was entirely in the custody of Mrs. Field, though she was the housekeeper, only the mistress. And she lived in a manner as if it had been her own. She took care of this house like her own. More than, as I said earlier, more than what this owner would have done. She kept up the dignity of this great house. And after that, this foolish rich person started pulling down all those ornaments, all those embellishments of this great house. He പറയുന്ന wooden carvings എല്ലാം പതുക്കെ പതുക്കെ നീക്കം ചെയ്ത് he used all those modern inventions. So all those old ornaments were stripped away, carried away to the other house. And it says that when he took all those old ornaments from this great house to his other house looked so tawdry, looked so ugly. It looked like, he says that it looked as awkward as if someone were to carry away the old tombs that had been lately at the abbey and stick them in Lady C's tawdry gilt drawing room. അത് ഏതുപോലെ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു? ഇവിടെ നിന്ന് ആ പറയുന്ന ഓൾഡ് ഓർണമെന്റ്സ്, ഈ പറയുന്ന പഴയ വീട്ടിൽ എത്രമാത്രം ഭംഗിയോടെ നിന്ന കാര്യങ്ങൾ ഈ പറയുന്ന റിച്ച് പേഴ്സൺ സ്റ്റാർട്ടഡ് റിമൂവിങ് ആൻഡ് ഹി ടുക്ക് ഇറ്റ് ടു ഹിസ് അതർ ഹൗസ് ആൻഡ് ഹി കമ്പയർസ് ഇറ്റ് ടു അനദർ വൺ, ടേക്കിംഗ് ഔട്ട് ഓൾ ദോസ് ടൂംസ്. ഈ പറയുന്ന വെസ്റ്റ് മിൻസ്റ്റർ അബേയിലുള്ള ടൂംസ്, ആ ശവകുടീരങ്ങൾ കൊണ്ടുവന്ന് ഒരു ലേഡി സി എന്ന് പറയുന്ന ഒരു ഇമാജിനറി ക്യാരക്ടറിന്റെ ഡ്രോയിങ് റൂമിൽ കൊണ്ടുവന്ന് വെച്ചാൽ എങ്ങനെ ഇരിക്കും? ഹൗ ഓക്വേർഡ് ഇറ്റ് ലുക്സ്. എത്രമാത്രം ഓക്വേർഡ് ആയിരിക്കും, എത്രമാത്രം സ്ട്രേഞ്ച് ആയിരിക്കും, എത്രമാത്രം, മലയാളത്തിൽ പറഞ്ഞാൽ എത്രമാത്രം വൃത്തികേടായിരിക്കും എന്ന് പറയുന്ന രീതിയിൽ. അത്രയും ഫൂളിഷ്, ഒരു എസ്തെറ്റിക് സെൻസ് ഒട്ടുമില്ലാത്തൊരു മനുഷ്യനായിരുന്നു അതിൻ്റെ റിയൽ ഓണർ. And he continues, here John smiled as much as to say that would be foolish indeed. So when he talked about the great mansion and about all those wooden carvings and how it was taken up, pulled down by this owner, he got the reaction of Alice. Now he gets the reaction of John. When he says about this house being destroyed by this foolish rich person, John smiled. And he had this look like, that would be foolish indeed. എന്തുമാത്രം വിഡ്ഢിത്തരമാണ് അയാൾ കാണിച്ചത് എന്നുള്ള ഒരു മുഖഭാവമാണ് ആർക്കുണ്ടായത്? ജോണിനുണ്ടായത്. And later in this essay, he starts talking about the funeral of this great grandmother, Mrs. Field, he says that her funeral was attended by a concourse of all the poor and some of the gentry too of the neighborhood for many miles around to show their respect for her memory because she had been such a good and religious woman. So he repeats the characteristics or the nature of this Mrs. Field. She was respected and she was considered to be beloved in the neighborhood. That is why her funeral was attended by every man alike, be it poor or from gentry class. Everybody attended the funeral of Mrs. Field because she was very good to everyone, she was respected by everyone, and the way she carried this house, how she kept this house in a well maintained manner. All these things earned respect for Mrs. Field. He continued. He says that she was a religious person. She knew all the psaltery by heart and a great part of the Testament besides. So she knew all those prayers, all those testaments from Bible by heart. As you know, all these grandmothers, even in your house, you will see all your grandmothers will know all those prayers in prayer books and even parts from the Bible by heart. ഇല്ലേ, നിങ്ങളുടെ വീട്ടിലുള്ള ഈ പറയുന്ന ഗ്രാൻഡ് മദർ ആണെങ്കിലും നിങ്ങൾ ശ്രദ്ധിച്ചാൽ മതി, നമ്മൾ പ്രാർത്ഥന ചൊല്ലാനിരിക്കുമ്പോൾ അവർക്ക് ബുക്കുകളൊന്നും വേണമെന്നില്ല, ബൈബിൾ വേണമെന്നില്ല, അവർക്കൊരു കൊന്ത മാത്രം മതി. ബിക്കോസ് ദേ ആർ വെരി റിലീജിയസ് പീപ്പിൾ. അവർക്ക് ഇറ്റ് ഈസ് ലൈക്ക് ബൈബിൾ ഈസ് സംതിങ് ലൈക്ക് ഫുഡ് ഫോർ ദം. They knew it by heart. It is something which is closest to their heart. Here, again, he gets the reaction of Alice. He says that here little Alice spread her hands. So, she is trying to imitate her great grandmother. She is trying to present that she also has the traits, all those good traits of her grandmother, great grandmother, Mrs. Field. That is why she is spreading her hands. And he continues, he says that she was a tall, Mrs. Field was a tall, upright, graceful person. And she was a best dancer in her youthful days. Here, again, he gets the reaction of Alice. Being a girl, she is so excited to hear that her grandmother was a great dancer. Here, Alice's little right foot played an involuntary movement. Involuntary movement, till upon my looking grave it desisted. The best dancer, I was saying, in the county, till a cruel disease called a cancer came and bowed her down with pain, but it could never bend her good spirits or make them stoop. But they were still upright because she was so good and religious. So Charles Lamb is constantly bringing this point that Mrs. Field was a very good person and also she was a religious person. He adds one more point that she was a good dancer, and here he gets the reaction of Alice. She started playing with her legs. It was something like an involuntary movement. It is something like an act which shows that she inherits most of the traits of her grandmother. ഈ പറയുന്ന ആലിസിന് ഗ്രാൻഡ് ഗ്രേറ്റ് ഗ്രാൻഡ് മദറിൻ്റെ പലതരം സ്വഭാവങ്ങൾ ഈ പറയുന്ന നേച്ചറുണ്ട് എന്നുള്ള ആ ഒരു കാണിക്കുന്നതാണത്. ആൻഡ് ഷീ സ്റ്റോപ്ഡ് മൂവിങ് ഹെർ ലെഗ്സ് വെൻ he started looking so serious, when he started narrating how she was forced to stop dancing. It was due to this disease, due to this deadly disease known as cancer. But he continues, he says that it couldn't lower her spirits, though she was there with great pain. It couldn't lower her spirits because he brings in the same point that she was so good and religious. Here ends most of the descriptions about the mansion and Mrs. Field. Here I am stopping my lecture. Hope it is clear. Please read the essay. So I have started the essay with a general statement like children love to listen to stories about their elders, and then there is this description of mansion in Norfolk, about children in wood, and mainly about Mrs. Field's character. So I have stopped here till this sentence. But it could never bend her good spirits or make them stoop, but they were still upright because she was so good and religious. So, girls, please read till this part, and in the next class, I will give you the explanation of the next part. Hope it is clear. Thank you, girls. Have a nice day.